And I'm Matt. New room.
Old room in the office. And we grabbed the table from the back room to try and just freshen things up a bit. And the CodCast just turned 1 year old. So what started as a bit of fun, almost a bit of a joke, we're now on the 23rd episode with another one waiting me to edit over the weekend. So
And that's with someone you met at the Cobalt conference?
Yeah, YJ Lee is a fundy up in Singapore. I was presenting to him. He started talking about things he does and doesn't like about juniors. And I thought, well, this is a really great opportunity to get him on camera. So it was an interesting conversation. I've got a bit of time to edit. I've torn my quad, so I can't train tomorrow. So instead of my usual 5 hours training on Saturday, I'm going to edit the CodCast. Episode today. So what's on? First is I've had a few emails recently just saying, look, hey, Chris, loved the content recently, great CodCast, watch your speech at RIU, but it'd be really nice to hear a bit more about what you're doing at Coda. What's the plan? What's next? And that's pretty fundamental. We're not quite ready to be able to talk about everything that we're doing in detail. Got to get the ASX announcements out first. But I thought we could at least talk about that today. So maybe in the second half. And then, wow, what a week it's been.
Yeah.
What a week it's been in copper. Things are suddenly happening.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like for a long time, analysts and we sort of parrot the analysts, I get,
but have our own views.
Yeah, have been talking about a looming supply shortage or a crunch, and it sort of feels like in the last couple of weeks we've sort of moved from that looming to the very early stages of that actually being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Seen stocks diminish.
Yeah, I mean, London or the LME have been falling since September. I mean, they're at about 160,000 tonnes worldwide, but Shanghai got down as low as 80,000 tonnes. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if it's a record, but it's certainly a recent record.
Yeah.
Now, some of that was arbitrage opportunities, shipping stuff to America prior to the tariffs kicking in, and we are seeing a bit of a scrap response as well. So there is some more coming into the system that needs those high prices and high demand, but fundamentally, I mean, the story, I think, is one of limited supply. I mean, we know the Chinese have somewhat overbuilt their smelter capacity, and that's sort of driven down TCRCs and sort of made the whole thing a little bit more attractive.
So TCRC is what you effectively pay the smelter to turn your concentrate into
metal. That's not something that necessarily applies to us, since we want to produce final product, but it's a sort of an indicator of the state of the market.
Yeah, exactly.
And as these TCRCs have fallen, I mean, in fact, to the point where some of the smelters can't stay open. The less efficient ones, there's just not enough concentrate out there for them to compete with some of their more efficient brethren.
Yeah.
And that, again, it's not lack of demand. It's simply lack of supply of concentrate on the market.
Yeah.
We weren't there, but the reporting out of LME Asia Week in Hong Kong, apparently Mercuria, who are a big trading house, were speaking to them, and they've forecast a 700,000 tonne deficit of concentrate.
To put it in context, the world copper market is about 23 million tonnes.
Of metal?
Of metal.
Yeah, so it was a 700,000 tonne concentrate deficit, which converts out to about a 300,000 tonne metal deficit.
Yeah.
And that's huge. That's this year. It's huge.
It's huge. That's important. I mean, the one thing about copper is it's an enormous market. It doesn't move like lithium does. It's like 20, 30 times the size, depending on where you measure it. Everything comes down to elasticities of supply and demand in mineral economics. It really is that simple. How fast can you bring on new supply when demand changes? If you can't, the price spikes. If you can, it doesn't. And obviously, demand has to move a lot in copper to move the price a lot, because it's a huge market.
Yeah.
But at the same time, most of the world's copper is produced in a handful of very large mines. And it's not like you can just click your fingers and get 5 Codas and New Worlds into production tomorrow. There's a process to go through.
Yeah.
And we've seen you an article this week about a guy who made about $1.5 billion in gold.
Yeah.
Bian Ximing.
I'll leave the pronunciation to you.
My 27 years of learning Chinese comes in useful occasionally these days. So Bian Ximing, he made about $1.5 billion recently in gold.
Sort of saw the writing on the wall, sort of forecast the demand for gold would go up as a sort of hedge against inflation and sort of trying to get off the US dollar a little bit.
I saw that too, but I didn't make $1.5 billion from it.
Helps to start a billionaire, I think.
It certainly does. And talking of billions, I mean, he's amassed a copper position now of 90,000 tons.
Yeah, I think it's the largest copper futures position in the history of the Shanghai Commodities Exchange. It's huge.
So yeah, very smart man. He's obviously seen something in copper changing. I think we can see that too. So I mean, other happenings this week, or massive week.
Yeah,
you got our friends at New World Resources. Hey Nick and everyone. You've got our friends at Xanadu.
Hey Cole.
Hey Cole. For those of you who don't know, Cole Moorhead is our chief geological advisor
and CEO at Xanadu.
Oh, sorry, he's our chief geological advisor. He's the exec chairman.
Oh, he's the exec chairman.
At Xanadu. And both companies, so very friendly. I was found New World to be really lovely people and very open as well. But offers for both.
Yeah, big offers too. 185 million for New World and I think 160 for Xanadu.
Yeah, well over 100% premium.
Yeah.
And 150% to New World's last raise. So they were clearly getting moving. I mean, the approvals were advancing. DFS was advancing. They looked to me like people who were going to go and mine that thing. But you get a premium like that from a solid group. It releases you from future funding requirements, dilution, the requirement to fund what isn't a small capex. I mean, all in, I think they quote about 300 mil US capex. But all in with the sort of additional decline and everything else, it ends up just a hair under Coda's all-in number. So mid sixes.
Yeah, once you convert to Aussie and make them comparable.
Yeah.
Is there much we can take from this that we can sort of, it is the CodCast after all. Like, is there much we can sort of think about what Coda could be looking at in the future? Or
look, one of the things we try really carefully to do on the CodCast is never to skirt around ASX listing rules or do anything that, talk about anything that's not very clearly within the rules. So what I'll say is when you look at, again, Rex Minerals, that went for about 400. When you look at New World, you see companies with very comparable planned production, very comparable net present values. Both of them are at a more advanced stage. If there is one challenge we have at Coda consistently, it is sort of being at that post-scoping study stage. Now, time is linear. I've said that dozens of times on this podcast. It's one of my catchphrases, but time is linear. Both New World and Rex were listed about 20 years, I think. It's only a very long time. And in a much shorter time, we've delivered a resource, delivered a scoping study, delivered a mining plan, a processing plan. We're updating that process plan and working on another one, which we'll come to in a couple of minutes. But, one of the reasons the ASX doesn't like comparisons is because of companies at different stages.
And we should say, I suppose, that New World and Xanadu both had PFSs out.
Both had PFSs out, both advancing pretty well. We are obviously working on our PFS. We are obviously very heavily involved in doing approvals at the moment. We're obviously a 4-person team at Coda, and one person full-time just really on approvals, plus all of us supporting. So again, time is linear. You get through these things. What I take from this is a couple of things. The first is, if you're a fan of the Lion Selection Clock, we're at 5 a.m. I'll post a link in this if you haven't seen it. It's effectively where M&A starts to hot up. And we also see what companies that are a little bit more, not massively, but a little bit more advanced down that approvals and PFS process are worth at arm's length to willing buyers. And I think that value uplift, we talked about it last week on the CodCast, that feasibility stage stuff, right? To my mind, it's that simple. You do the work. If you've got a good project with good plans, everything holds together, you get rewarded very strongly. And that's by going into production or that's by being acquired at a massive premium.
And it sort of comes back to what we were talking about before, as if we are entering into that structural copper deficit, it's probably the exact right time to also be moving up that approvals and feasibility pathway into something that gets you on a few more radars. Yeah,
possibly even early in that process, hang on a little longer, the values may come up as well. But I mean, look, I think Nick at New World's doing a great job. I think this is a smart move. And I think shareholders should be pretty pleased in the context of the last few years. But again, it's more evidence that there are really good companies out there looking to acquire good projects. But the key to my mind to unlocking these is to just be a little bit more advanced, have your approvals moving on. I think they're talking about getting approvals in place by mid next year for New World.
Right.
And then the DFS, I think, was on track for a sort of similar delivery end of this year, early next as well.
So again, it's just more evidence that as you move through those pathways, you get rewarded.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing.
So coming back to the question of what are we doing at the moment? One is we're advancing the project. We're moving it on. We've been around a lot less time than most of our copper peers. The second is around this metallurgical work.
Yeah, sort of feeding into the PFS and sort of moving into that. That's sort of my sort of primary focus at the moment, along with normal admin stuff that you can never quite avoid.
The endless cycle of tenement reporting and deadlines. Metallurgical work sometimes gets a bit of an eye roll from shareholders who really like to see drilling. Now, we talked about this, 2 weeks ago on the CodCast. We talked about that feasibility work, adding value. We've just talked about two companies that are in acquisition right now, especially New World, because of having done that work. And the second thing, key thing really want to talk about today on the CodCast is, as I said, people have been saying, what next for Coda? We're not quite at a stage where we can talk in detail, or in fact, at all about results. We don't have all of them in, and we have to put this out to ASX first.
Yes.
But just in general, so based on what I've said on stage and what we've already put out to market, we are focused on flow sheet enhancements.
I would say flow sheet rebuilding.
To be fair, it's a complete rebuild. So as I said, we've got flotation and Albion in our circuit. So you effectively float the whole ore. Then you concentrate it. Then that gets reground and it goes into a ambient tank leach. It's called Albion.
Yeah.
What we're looking to do, and there's about $175 million worth of capex and all of that.
Yep.
We are looking to replace it with what?
With a whole ore ammonia leach.
Yeah. Just for context, whole ore leach is effectively where you take the rock out of the ground.
Yep.
It gets you do a crush and grind, and then that goes into a tank, right?
Yep. No concentration, no nothing. It goes in at the grade it comes out of the ground.
Yeah, roughly a couple of % copper equivalent.
Yep. Tanks and agitators and the chemistry that actually extracts the metal.
Yep.
And then once it's in the ammonia, you can run it through your downstream hydromet processing plant and produce the same basic products as we had been intending all along, and as we talk about in the scoping study.
Yeah, so you're replacing $175 million worth of float and Albion with polytanks. And, the reason that this is now something that we're looking at again, because actually I looked at the Monarchal leach in about 2018, is that we've had sort of a conceptual breakthrough in the chemistry where we understand the way that it catalyzes in a different way. And we think we're trying to ensure that we can do it better at a much lower capex and with potentially better recoveries than with the flotation Albion.
Yeah, we've spoken in the past about our flotation and you inherently have some losses when you do flotation. With whole ore, if you can get high recoveries, then you eliminate that entire potential for losses in the float, which is where the big benefits can potentially come for Coda.
Yeah, and what are the two things that hold back companies at our stage, and it's not just Coda, it's pretty much everyone in the market. It is stage, so we've just talked about that extensively, and it's capex.
Yep.
So advancing the stage, reducing the capex.
Yeah.
This seems like a worthwhile thing to do. We haven't got this information out yet. I've got YJ Lee coming up in a couple of weeks on the CodCast, sort of talking about things that juniors do. One of the things, we're trying to do is make sure we've got good representativity across this, right?
Yeah, it is a bit of a bad habit amongst certain juniors, and once you know about it, you see it everywhere.
You do.
But there's a tendency, it happens more often than you'd like, to take your very best sample, send it to the Mets, see what your recovery is off that, and then, oh, fantastic, recovery is great.
Yeah.
Plug it into your economic models, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
But then later down the line, you do more representative sample, you do some variability test work,
Yeah.
and suddenly the story gets a lot more complicated and rarely better.
Rarely better.
And
I don't like to see that.
No, and that's what we're doing now is really making sure that we are avoiding that particular trap. So we're testing with representative ore. We're also doing variability. So we're getting sample from more than one spot.
Yeah.
And we are making sure that not only are we getting the recoveries we want in our main product, obviously in copper, but also in our byproducts, and just ensuring that the plan we want to take to market isn't going to have any surprises down the line.
Yeah. So thanks for that summary, Matt. I hope it answers some of the questions I've been getting, which is what are you focused on right now? Again, strategically, it's advancing this project as fast as we can, moving on the approvals, moving on the stage. And then with the metallurgy, it's about just getting that work done.
Yeah.
Right? So with that, can I suggest you stop messing around in here with me and get back to banging on some assay lab desks?
Do what I can.
And we'll be back to talk about this as soon as we can.
As soon as the announcement goes out.
Yeah, and keep watching that copper market, because I think it's starting to hot up.
It is, and it's always fascinating.
It's never boring, has to be said. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Cheers.